Before Sean Diddy Combs became a scandal, he was a blueprint. Before the lawsuits, before the raids.
I don't think they're actually searching for any items that could connect whatever the investigation is. I would venture to say that those are going to be...
Before the headlines that suddenly sounded shocked, he was power personified.
Real name is Cassie Ventura. They're saying tonight that the two have settled a lawsuit she filed against the mogul yesterday in Manhattan federal court. Ventura accused him of rape and years of physical and emotional abuse. There are no further details yet tonight about the terms of the settlement.
Not the loud kind, the untouchable kind. For decades, Diddy wasn't just in the music industry, he helped design how it works, how fame is manufactured, how loyalty is bought, how silence is maintained, and that's what makes his fall different. This isn't just about one man collapsing, it's about what happens when someone who understood the system too well stops being protected by it. Sean Combs didn't come from privilege, he came from Harlem. Hustle wasn't branding, it was survival. From early on, he understood something most artists never fully grasped. Talent gets attention, but control builds empires. In the 90s, while rappers were chasing hits, Diddy was studying infrastructure. He wasn't trying to be the best rapper, he was trying to own the room the rappers walked into. Bad Boy Records wasn't just a label, it was a cultural engine, glossy videos, luxury aesthetics, pain packaged as aspiration. He sold struggle, but filtered through champagne and designer suits, and people bought it. Not just fans, the industry did too, because Diddy represented a new archetype, the executive who could perform like an artist and the artist who could think like a CEO. That dual identity made him dangerous. Not controversial, dangerous, because he blurred a line the industry depends on, the line between creator and controller. When one person becomes both, accountability starts to disappear. Through the 90s and early 2000s, his influence expanded quietly but aggressively. Music, fashion, alcohol brands, television. He wasn't building a career, he was building leverage, and leverage changes how people behave around you. When someone controls opportunities, rooms get quieter, disagreements get softer, stories get buried before they're spoken. That's the part the public rarely sees. Power doesn't always look violent, sometimes it looks like access, invites, cosigns, phone calls that change lives overnight. And when one person holds too many of those keys, the ecosystem adapts around them. People stop asking, "Is this right?" They start asking, "Is this worth losing everything?" For years, Diddy existed inside that question. To the public, he was aspirational. Sharp suits, billionaire energy, the embodiment of what hip-hop could become if it stopped apologizing and started owning. He wasn't just respected, he was mythologized. And myths are hard to challenge because myths don't just live in facts, they live in perception. You don't argue with a myth, you orbit it. That's why early whispers never became earthquakes. There were always stories, tension, fallouts, people who exited his circle quietly and never fully explained why, but in industries built on proximity, distance can be more expensive than silence. So, silence wins and silence compounds. The longer it lasts, the more expensive breaking it becomes. By the 2000s, Diddy wasn't just influential, he was institutional, a gatekeeper disguised as a mogul, a symbol of elevation. Proof that hip-hop had entered boardrooms without losing its edge. But power at that level does something subtle. It stops needing validation. When someone survives controversy long enough, they don't just recover. They evolve into something harder to confront, a constant, and constants reshape memory. Old allegations fade into trivia. Old conflicts get reframed as misunderstandings. Old discomfort gets edited into nostalgia. Time doesn't just pass, it cleans. And powerful people understand that better than anyone. Because survival in elite spaces isn't always about being innocent, it's about being inevitable. For years, Diddy felt inevitable, untouchable not because nothing was said, but because nothing stuck. And when nothing sticks long enough, a dangerous illusion forms that consequences are optional for the right people. But power has a pattern most people ignore. It doesn't collapse when accusations appear. It collapses when protection disappears. And protection isn't moral, it's strategic. As long as someone is useful, systems absorb discomfort, they reframe, they redirect, they wait. But usefulness has an expiration date. And when it expires, distance happens fast. That's when narratives shift overnight. Allies become observers, observers become critics, and silence, once loyal, starts leaking. By the early 2000s, the temperature changed. Not loudly, not all at once, but perceptibly. The industry felt different. Cultural tolerance was shrinking. Power dynamics were being re-examined. Stories that once sounded dangerous to tell started sounding expensive to ignore. And that's when the first real cracks began to show, not because darkness suddenly appeared, but because the lighting changed. Allegations that might have once been dismissed as rumors started entering courtrooms. Private discomfort started becoming public record, and the myth that had protected Diddy for decades began to face something myths rarely survive: documentation. Because whispers can be managed, but paperwork changes gravity, and once gravity shifts, even empires feel heavy. Once allegations move from conversations to court filings, the rules change. Rumors can be denied, articles can be spun, but lawsuits create timelines, details, paper trails that don't disappear just because someone is powerful. And that's where the fall really began. Not with outrage, with documentation. In late 2023, a lawsuit surfaced that didn't just accuse, it mapped. It described patterns, control dynamics, abuse framed not as chaos, but as structure. And structure is dangerous because it suggests intent. For the first time, the narrative wasn't about a mogul surrounded by controversy. It was about a system allegedly built around him. Power stops looking glamorous when it starts looking organized, and then something shifted fast. Settlements happened, more claims followed, names that once felt untouchable started appearing in legal language. And here's the part people misunderstand about power collapses. They feel sudden to the public, but slow to the insiders. By the time headlines explode, whispers have already turned into exits. Distance began showing up everywhere, brands got quiet, collaborators stopped posting, industry loyalty, once loud, became carefully neutral. No statements, no defenses, just absence. And absence at that level speaks loudly, because real influence isn't measured by how many people celebrate you at your peak. It's measured by how many stand beside you when standing costs something. That number started shrinking. Then came the images that change perception permanently: federal raids, properties searched, footage that replaces myth with reality. Nothing dismantles an aura faster than visuals. For decades, Diddy was photographed in control, curated environments, perfect lighting, commanding rooms. Now the imagery was different, unscripted, cold, procedural. And once the visual mythology breaks, memory rewrites itself fast. The same public that once saw dominance starts seeing something else entirely: vulnerability. But the deeper shift wasn't visual, it was psychological. Because scandals like this don't just change how people see one man. They force a question the industry hates confronting. How much did people know and choose not to know? Power rarely operates in isolation. It operates in ecosystems: assistants, executives, security, peers, media. When one giant falls, the shadow doesn't belong to them alone, and that's why moments like this feel bigger than celebrity gossip. They destabilize comfort. If someone this visible could allegedly operate unchecked for years, what does that say about the environments around them? That's the real tension underneath the headlines. Not curiosity, complicity. Because systems don't just protect power out of loyalty, they protect it out of convenience. As long as the machine is profitable, questions feel disruptive, silence feels practical, until silence becomes liability. And that's when alignment flips. Not always because people suddenly find courage, but because risk changes direction. Supporting power becomes dangerous, distancing from it becomes strategic, and the industry is deeply fluent in strategy. That's why falls like this feel so cold. There's rarely a dramatic turning point, just a slow evaporation of protection. Calls stop getting returned, rooms get smaller, introductions disappear. Influence doesn't explode, it dissolves, and once dissolution starts, reputation enters a phase most powerful people never prepare for: irreversibility. Because scandals tied to behavior can sometimes be rehabilitated, but scandals tied to patterns rewrite legacy. They don't just question what someone did, they question what someone was allowed to be, and that distinction matters. Because legacy isn't built only on achievements, it's built on interpretation. The same empire that once symbolized ambition can start symbolizing something else entirely, and once cultural meaning shifts, it rarely shifts back. That's where the real fall lives. Not in court outcomes, not in headlines, in memory. How a generation decides to remember a name. Was he a mogul who elevated culture, or a symbol of what unchecked power can become? That battle isn't fought in legal rooms, it's fought in collective perception. And perception is ruthless. It doesn't wait for verdicts, it moves with momentum. Right now that momentum is still forming, details are still emerging, outcomes are still uncertain, but one thing already feels clear. The era of untouchable figures is shrinking. Not because power disappeared. In a hyper-documented world, patterns surface faster, receipts travel further, silence holds less, and that creates a new kind of instability for people who built empires in older rules. Because dominance built in opacity struggles to survive transparency, that doesn't mean justice suddenly becomes perfect or systems suddenly become clean. But it does mean something shifts. The distance between rumor and consequence gets shorter, and for figures who once relied on time to dilute damage, time no longer behaves the same way. That might be the most unsettling part of this story, not the fall itself, but what it signals. That power is still real, still concentrated, still capable of shaping silence, but no longer guaranteed permanence. And when permanence disappears, so does the illusion that anyone is too big to face gravity. That illusion protected a lot of empires, not just one. Now it's cracking in public, and when illusions crack, they don't just expose individuals, they expose environments, which leads to the only question that actually matters now. If power like this could exist in plain sight for decades, how many other versions of it are still being normalized simply because they haven't collapsed yet? Because history shows something uncomfortable, we don't usually discover the full shape of power while it's rising. We understand it after it falls.